is the Writer's Almanac for Tuesday, November the 24th, 2020. It's the birthday of the woman who first published James Joyce's Ulysses. Margaret Anderson, born in Indianapolis, 1886, grew up in a small town in Indiana, didn't fit in, so she moved to Chicago, wanted to start a magazine devoted to the avant-garde, and she called it The Little Review. First issue came out March 1914. It was 4 years later that Ezra Pound showed Margaret Anderson the manuscript of Ulysses, James Joyce's Ulysses. She read it. She wrote to Pound, "This is the most beautiful thing we'll ever have. We'll print it if it's the last effort of our lives." And they did print it, but all of the copies of the magazine were confiscated by the U.S. Post Office, and they were burned, and she was charged with obscenity. Margaret Anderson said, "I wasn't born to be a fighter. The causes I have fought for have invariably been causes that should have been gained by a delicate suggestion. Since they never were, I made myself into a fighter." And it's the birthday of the novelist Neruda Farah, born in Somalia, 1945. Novels, all in English, all about Somalia. Neruda Farah, who said, "The only thing I can say is that I have tried my best to keep my country alive by writing about it." It was on this day in 1434 the River Thames froze over and stayed frozen over until February the following year. The Thames was wider and shallower then, and it flowed more slowly, so it was more conducive to freezing. And so people held carnivals out on the ice. They called them frost fairs. They sold a drink made of wormwood wine and gin called Pearl, which was drunk hot. There was bull baiting and puppet shows and bowling, and they roasted oxen, and boys played games of football out on the ice. It's the birthday of the architect Cass Gilbert, born Zanesville, Ohio, 1859, who designed the U.S. Supreme Court building in Washington, the state capitol of Minnesota, the Woolworth Building. Cass Gilbert, who said, "Public buildings best serve the public by being beautiful." And it's the birthday of the novelist Arundhati Roy, born in Shillong, India, 1959, whose first novel was The God of Small Things, published 1997, sold more than 6 million copies, won the Booker Prize. Since then, she's been writing essays and articles, books of nonfiction, and a second novel. Here's a poem for today by Stephen Dunn, Long Term. On this they were in agreement. Everything that can happen between two people happens after a while, or has been thought about so hard, there's almost no difference between desire and deed. Each day they stayed together, therefore, was a day of forgiveness, tacit, no reason to say the words. It was easy to forgive, so much harder to be forgiven. The forgiven had to agree to eat dust in the house of the noble, and both knew this couldn't go on for long. The forgiven would need to rise. The forgiver need to remember the cruelty in being correct, which is why, except in crises, they spoke about the garden, what happened at work, the little ailments and aches their familiar bodies separately felt. A poem by Stephen Dunn, Long Term, from his new and selected poems, published by W.W. Norton and used by permission here on the Writer's Almanac, funded by donations from listeners like you, now available on PRX for distribution by your local radio station. Be well, do good work, and keep in touch.